Hello, A Pushers. It's JB here. We're going to deal with Manifest Destiny. I like to teach this through document analysis. It really gets ingrained into the kids' heads when we use primary sources. And in this one, we'll use a secondary source. We're going to look at a text-based source, and we're going to look at a non-text-based source. And then we'll look at a secondary source to take it all the way home. So sit back, relax, and here's how I present Manifest Destiny. And hopefully, this will help to develop analytical skills of documents for your students. So, Manifest Destiny, where does the phrase come from? And I start with this exactly where it comes from. A article by John L. Sullivan in the Democratic Review, 1845. And as you can read here, away, away with these cobweb tissues of the rights of discovery, exploration, settlement. The American claim is by the right of our manifest destiny to overspread and to possess the whole of the continent, which Providence has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty. Just this quote, just this, will explain the reasons for American expansionism across the continent, all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Just by looking at keywords in this phrase, we can explain to the students what manifest destiny was and is. And so, let's look at the first part. Away, away with these cobweb tissues. Cobweb. What does that word mean to you? We know cobwebs, it's as if it's been go in the attic or in a place or a haunted house, and that's what you definitely see. You see a place that hasn't been cleaned or has been abandoned or neglected or forgotten, and that's what's been forgotten. This is the old. Those rights of discovery, exploration, settlement. It's been 400 years since we've discovered the New World. We've explored it left and right. We've settled. We know what's out there. Now it's a matter of claiming it. Right? Now it's a matter of exploiting it, extracting every resource we can imagine. And of course, doing much more than planting our flag. Now we want to spread our ideals. And that is our right. That is the American right. That land is supposedly ours. That is our destiny. And remember, we just break that word down. Destiny. That is the inevitable fate. That is the end result. That's what's going to happen. To overspread and to possess the whole of the continent. It is our destiny as Americans to take that entire land, all of it, all of it from the Atlantic to the Pacific, to possess it, to overspread and to possess it. And you know what justifies that? Do you know what justifies that? Right there. God, providence. It's our destiny. And God says, you know what? I created this world. I created this piece of land right here in between the Pacific and the Atlantic, and I have given it to you, America. It's yours. Take it. It's nobody else's. By the way, you might have some people there, and you can kick them out because either they can stay and deal with what you're bringing them, or they're going to have to move in some form or fashion. And they would have the justification that it is their destiny. It is divine intervention that America expands to the Pacific. And when we talk about development, let's look at that word and how we can decipher this word. Development. What are we talking about? We could be talking about economic development. We could be talking about railroads. We could be talking about extracting the natural resources in all of that land that we will eventually acquire to develop our economy, to develop our industries, to develop our agricultural sector. That's one of the major reasons for expanding is to gain territory, to gain those natural resources, to exploit those natural resources, and to feed our economy. And then we look at great experiment of liberty, because we are the empire of liberty, and we must spread our democratic ideals across the continent and hopefully the world. But home is where the heart is, and first and foremost, we have to establish our democratic ideals right here in our own backyard. We are going to democratize the entire land all the way to the Pacific. We are going to spread freedom. We're going to spread independence. We're going to spread suffrage. We're going to spread liberty. We're going to spread all those democratic ideals that we fought and died for from the American Revolution and all the way through the War of 1812, and still going strong, and will continue to fight that glorious cause and spread our ideals across this continent. That is our destiny. That is our civic duty. And right there, ladies and gentlemen, you have major reasons for expansionism just from that quote alone. And so those kids can look at that and be like, wow, right there, in just those words, we've broken down manifest destiny. Coming, and then you can say, all right, point of view. John L. Sullivan, Democratic Review, 1845. Looking at the year 1845, we're in the heart of expansionism. There's rumblings about expanding into the West in regards to, there was Oregon and Texas, and now it'll eventually get into the Mexican-American War. And then, of course, John L. Sullivan is one of these supporters of expansionism. We can say is that this guy really wants America to expand to the West. He believes in that destiny. He believes it's written in the wind. Providence has given us the right, and we need to develop our country economically, become prosperous, and of course, spread our natural rights across this continent and spread the ideals of democracy and republicanism to everyone and anyone. So then I get into this non-text stimulus. American Progress by John Gast, as you can see, 1872. Now, granted, I'm using this painting that was created 30 years later and in a different period. However, it's still a primary source. It still can be used to explain manifest destiny through a non-text stimulus. It's a fantastic painting, very popularized. We see it in short answer questions. We see it pretty much all the time, and it's a great way to really ingrain the idea of manifest destiny and the idea of American expansionism into the students' minds. And first thing I do with this is ask my students, what do you see? I just want a description. I just want to see what you see. Don't analyze it. Don't break it down. Just tell me what you see. That's all I want. That's it. Just use your eyes and tell me. It's a very simple question. You know, the kids think I'm tricking them, and I go, I just want to know what you see. Just tell me what you see. So then, we'll go from left to right here. I get answer, here are the answers. There's buffalo, they're natives, there's a bear, I think. All right, there's mountains in the background. There are dark clouds. Okay, as we keep going to the right, we start seeing people walking, people on horseback. We see wagons. Okay, we see somebody on a horse galloping pretty fast here as we keep going. Then we see Columbia. Okay, and she's holding on to some telegraph wire here. And then as we keep going, we see a stagecoach. Okay, horses. As we keep going, we see that telegraph wire, those telegraph poles. We start seeing railroads. We start seeing locomotives. We see it toward the foreground and toward the background. We see farming. We see cattle. We see a plow. Okay, there's a deer. There's someone's homestead. As we go back, we see a city. We see bridges. We see ships. We see the clouds are not as prevalent as they are on the left side, and we see the sun. It's brighter over here, and we notice that everyone is going into into the west, or the direction to our left, and that's what's happening. So that's what they see. Now, when we jot all that down, then I ask the students, okay, that's what you see. Now analyze it. Base it on what you read, what we've gone over class. Base it on what we were dealing with when it came to the Manifest Destiny quote by John L. Sullivan. I want to know what you see. Let's now start showing some historical context. Okay? What do we know about American history at this time in period 4 and even before then? What could you do? Analyze it, break it down. Let's get some inferences. And here's where the students will start saying the buffalo. Okay? They're heading to the west. They're being slaughtered. They're being used for, they're being slaughtered for their hides. They're being hunted uh, for their meat somewhat, but really for their hides and that fur trading business. We see the natives. They're fleeing to the west. They look uncivilized. Um, they're heading into that darkness as if they're still trying to preserve their uncivilized nature. They We see farmers. We see that this is expansionism. We see how we go from uh, primal uh, state of nature to the left, and we progress as we move toward the right. And Colombia, being that Uncle Sam of the time, that personification of America, she is bringing progress. She is bringing communication. She is bringing technology. She is bringing expansionism. She is bringing settlement. And we see how we go from the natives who only have the horse or run. And now we see there are Americans that, yes, they have the horse, they walk, but they also have stagecoach, so, and then trains, and then we see settlement, and then that's progress. As we keep moving to that right, we see progress, we see industrialization, we see urbanization, we see settlement, and when we juxtapose that with the sky, and we see that in a state of nature, it's scary. It's uninviting. But when we progress, when we urbanize, when we industrialize, we see that providence is showing the light, is saying that this is our enlightenment. As some kids have pointed out, they'll say that that's enlightenment as we know more, educate more, and progress. Um, another piece of analysis is that this expansionism is not going to be easy. There are going to be obstacles. Nature, the natives, the mountains. Those could be the Rocky Mountains. Those the trails aren't going to be easy. Um, we're going to see, we're going to need those wagons. We're going to need provisions. But as we take that risk, as Americans do, we'll bring progress. We'll communicate. We'll connect that continent that has been untouched by American hands and unseen by American eyes, and we're gonna connect it to the civilized world, and that's what we're gonna do with the telegraph, and that's what we're gonna do with the railroads. Another piece of analysis that a couple of students have always pointed out, and I've always thought it was impressive, was if you on the right side we see that at the top where the sun is in the city, that's the north, and the north is industrialized, it's urbanized, and that's where most of the railroads are, and that's where most of the progress is. And then you look toward the bottom of the painting and you see the farmer and you see the cattle, and that's the south. The south and its agricultural lifestyle, its agricultural economy. And even though we don't see slaves there, remember this is 1872, but the analysis of distinguishing the top of the painting and the bottom of the painting and trying to make that north-south connection, especially since we are using this in period 4, will then relate to what's going to happen in period 5 with sectionalism and then eventually the Civil War. So there's an opportunity here to really illustrate the idea of progress and expansionism, and then eventually the sectional conflict. If you want to point out any others, that's what I do. I start with a description, and then we get into the analysis, and it really ingrains into the student's mind. Then finally, we look at a map of the United States depicting territorial growth in 1853. This is a secondary source. So what we want to do here is provide some historical context. With maps, we can, the historical context is the best extended analysis we could use. But here's the thing, we can do a review. We can do synthesis. If we're talking about Manifest Destiny in period 4, and as we keep going, when it comes to American expansionism, we can always go back and reference this map and say, all right, let's talk about American expansionism from the beginning. And we can see how, well, the United States, 1783, that's the Treaty of Paris, ending the American Revolution, granting those 13 colonies, now states, all the land from Britain to from the Atlantic to the Mississippi, or all that land west of the Appalachian Mountains. And there we go. West of the Appalachian Mountains, what was the big deal? Proclamation 1763. We can get into that. There we go. So our manifest destiny goes for, we wanted that land. Britain said no, so we got it anyway. That's what the revolution, one of the reasons for the revolution was, let's get some land because that's just our destiny. And then we continue, we get the all-important Louisiana Purchase in 1803, granting us the land from France west of the Mississippi, all the way until we get to Spanish territory and, of course, the Oregon country. This more than doubles what we already have, and of course, will lead that'll be the Lewis and Clark. I love how it's financed because without Hamilton's debt plan and the bank, we don't get British creditors to underwrite the financing for this Louisiana Purchase. But then again, we're talking about manifest destiny here, and we just wanted that land. And Jefferson's reasons was to expand that Empire of Liberty, and of course expand his agricultural ideal society for that yeoman farmer, and to keep spreading the idea of American ideals. I'm sorry if that was redundant, but we continue. We get the Florida with the Adams-Onis Treaty, or the Florida Purchase Treaty. That's where I'm from. Good job, John Quincy Adams. Thank you very much. And continuing, there's more to say to that in regards to Florida. We just need it. I mean, it just is a natural geographic progression of what should be ours anyway. And then we get Texas, or do we get Texas? Texas decides to rebel against Mexico, who had broken free from Spain, and then they decide they want to join the United States and annex us. We get into some domestic and foreign issues when it comes to Texas annexation, domestically because of the sectional conflict brewing during this time when it comes to the expansion of slavery, and then of course foreign issues when it comes to Mexico saying, hey, that actually should be ours. We still believe that Texas is a part of Mexico. That leads to the conflict on the Rio Grande, and eventually the Mexican-American War, and then that leads to the Mexican Cession. And then we have Oregon country, and Polk was able to acquire that land peacefully. Got a little aggressive, but was able to acquire that land from Great Britain through peaceful means, and of course got us all the way to the Pacific, a promise he kept, one of the promises he kept, but then again was also instrumental in acquiring the Mexican Cession lands, California, and those other states after defeating Mexico in the Mexican-American War, and as stated in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So all these references, all that contextualization, we see that have we fulfilled our destiny? Yes. This map proves that by 1853, We fulfilled our destiny. We went all the way from the Atlantic, all the way to the Pacific. We are going to bring progress. Colombia is flying over all this land that we have acquired by 1853. We see, yes, there's the Gadsden Purchase. So that way we could build that Southern Railroad, uh, which was controversial at the time, but eventually the Civil War is going to solve all those issues when it comes to that. But yes, Manifest Destiny has been achieved, or has it? And do we want does that pesky Pacific Ocean, does that stop us? Is that going to stop that drive of American expansionism? Is there something out there that still needs to be in American hands? Do we want to spread that empire of liberty? Do we want to spread the American ideals, the values that all Americans share? Do we want to spread um, our economy, expand our economy, and acquire more resources? And are we going to let the Pacific Ocean stand in our way? We didn't let the Appalachians stand in our way. We didn't let the Mississippi River stand in our way. We didn't let Mexico stand in our way. We didn't let Oregon and the Rocky Mountains stand in our way. What's going to stop us from crossing the Pacific? That's something that we'll think about and deal with when we get into period 5, 6, 7, 8. You get it.